So, with everyone's eyes turned toward the Epstein client list, many have overlooked the chaotic story of an international waters race. The UN is currently trying to become the commodore of the world through an international waters treaty. Donald Trump is steering his ship away from the fleet and into rough waters. He actually might soon be labeled an international pirate. We're going to get into that side of the story. But also, I mentioned the Epstein list for a reason, not just offhand, because he's actually at the bottom of this deep, deep story. And when I say at the bottom, think like seabed level. So if y'all have ever seen, you might be wondering why Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest is up on the screen. If y'all have ever seen this film, in this film, I'm gonna use this as kind of an analogy to set up what's happening in the world right now, having to do with, yes, the UN, the nations of the world, Donald Trump, Epstein, all of this. Okay. Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest. The East India Trading Company controls the sea, essentially, in this film by controlling the deadliest pirate, Davy Jones. Okay. So I don't know if there he is. He's right there on the cover. Okay. So he's right here on the cover, and I am going to play this intro. This is a long intro. I'm going to play the video in a second. But for those waiting for that, Davy Jones is right here, right? You got your main characters up here. You don't see the East India Trading Company, but they are essentially the company behind the pirate, right? Because he controls the Kraken, which is this giant sea monster on the high seas. They control him. So they've got the leverage to do whatever they want to do, and they make it look like it's a pirate that's doing it, right? All right. So think about, with that context, think about the leverage while I tell this story today and while we get into this conversation, think about the leverage that people are vying to get right now. And one of the things that Donald Trump is pushing back against. So stick around. We need to make our intro video a little longer so I have time to get a sip of coffee. Okay. So
we could just all sip it.
I'll just splash myself and hope
we'll make it the thing. Just make it the thing. Yeah.
So here's what's happening right now is we have this UN International Waters Treaty that's underway. And this actually points all the way back to 1982. So what happened was in 1982, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea, also called UNCLOS. So if we say that today, that's what we're talking about. Terrible, terrible name. And we're going to get into some worse names later. But it's a set of rules adopted in 1982 to govern the ocean, its resources, including scientific research, economic activities, etc. Okay. Part 11 of this convention concerns deep sea mining. That's what Trump is trying to do right now. And Part 11 states that an International Seabed Authority, or ISA, should be set up to regulate mineral exploration. And that was actually established in 1994. So now we jump from 1982 to 1994. Okay. So now we're jumping forward to 2023. Okay. 2023. Oh, and I'll say this. The U.S. had a lot to do with what was happening in 1982 and 1994. So we do have ties to both of those things, right? But we've stepped back, and even in 2023, Biden had ties to this treaty that they set up in 2023, and we were actually big part of it, setting that up. But we've stepped back since Trump has taken over. Okay, so that's where we're at. So the UN International Waters Treaty. This is a treaty that aims to protect international waters and their inhabitants. Talking about the ocean animals. The UN nations met in June for the third UN Ocean Conference in Nice, France, and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged world leaders to ratify a high seas treaty. So they created this treaty in 2023. 132 countries signed it, I guess, or whatever, or agreed to it. And then 2 years later, they said, oh, yeah, we've got this treaty. Let's actually do something about that. So they're like, we've got this treaty. We all agreed to it, but nobody's done anything. And it's weird how that works. How it's like, yeah, let's all do this thing. Woohoo. Let's have a party, go out and hit the bars in France afterwards. And then 2 years later go, oh yeah, we're supposed to do something. Anyways, so that's what's happening now. Now they're ratifying the treaty, right? They're ratifying it. So now we're actually going to do it. But they need 60 countries to ratify it. I think they currently had 50. Macron has said now he's expecting 15 more countries to ratify the treaty soon, and then another 15 by the end of the year. So to get to 60, that would be no sweat. If they get 30 more, that would be far over. And anyways, long story short, this treaty would go into law beginning of next year, 2026. Okay. So what does this treaty do? The High Seas Treaty, adopted in 23, would permit, or I'm going to say force countries, because it says that it would permit. And if you actually start reading what the treaty does and all that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But to say permit, essentially it would force countries to establish marine parks in international waters. International waters currently cover nearly 2/3 of the ocean. They're mostly unregulated, and that's going to play into the story later. But at the same time, these nations are finally fulfilling their promises. Trump is pulling out of climate projects, and we actually did not even send any high-level delegation to this meeting in June. We sent some people to kind of take notes, see what was going on. We were like, the U.S. is like, we don't even care. Y'all do whatever you want to do.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. It's great. So here's what Rebecca Hubbard, the director of the High Seas Alliance, has said about the United States. She said, if they don't ratify, they are not bound by it. So that's what they're saying outwardly, but we're going to look at what are the problems if we don't ratify, and what's the threat from the UN right now. So taming the high seas, UN Ocean Treaty nears entry into force. There's that word, force. That makes more sense. Okay. So this is what they're saying. It's going to permit countries. It's like, no, we're actually going to force you to do it. Okay.
Right.
So I want y'all to take a look at where this article is found. What website is this? Healthpolicywatch.news. All right. Independent Global Health Reporting. Interesting. We're going to look at the topics here. Antimicrobial resistance, infectious diseases, pandemics and emergencies, non-communicable diseases, health, climate, and SDGs. Okay. Pandemics and emergencies. Very interesting that they've categorized this in the same category, because we recently had a global pandemic, and who, no pun intended, tried to get out on top and essentially put bounds around all the nations of the earth and say, hey, actually, you all need a government above the government called the World Health Organization. Right. So with that in mind, let's go back to the Kraken analogy for a second and look for the leverage, right? Okay. So Macron has said this means this treaty will be able to enter into force January 1st of next year, which means we would finally have an international framework to regulate and administer the high seas. So that's a win. Interesting language there. Yeah. An international framework to regulate and administer the high seas. Some key provisions include 30% of international waters by the end of the decade, up from just 1.5%. So I would stop and say this is a good point to make. Okay. So protecting the oceans, I think, is great, right? Not a bad thing. But what comes with it? The same thing as like World Health Organization. If you just read about it and you had no history of anything they've done so far, sounds great. Trying to take care of people's, health, trying to protect the world from pandemics, things like that. Sounds great until you learn some of the things that they're trying to also do and the ways that they're doing it and what comes with it. All right. A couple other things. The USA has originally helped craft this agreement under Biden's administration. Now we actually have vocally opposed it. That's where we're sitting right now as the Trump administration. But some other major nations who haven't signed include Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Japan. So some of those nations are kind of an interesting.
Is China in that? Yeah.
I don't know if China has signed it or not, but they have definitely gotten aboard the threat toward the United States. I've got that a little bit lower in my notes. Yeah. They've kind of threatened the U.S. because we haven't signed it. So I'm guessing that they have. Okay. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. And then I'm going to share a little bit more of the threat that's involved directly, and then some of the problems with this treaty, and then how Trump is involved and what he's doing right now. What do y'all think about all this?
Anytime I hear these kinds of treaties and these kinds of things, and I think there's actually a limit. I'm pretty sure we need the Senate to approve these kinds of things. Like, and I know with this WHO treaty, this One Health thing, this was really a way to give up U.S. sovereignty. That's what Biden was working towards, and he was doing lots of things with the UN behind the scenes to sort of not calling it a treaty, but basically giving up U.S. sovereignty. And like that to me is the real issue here. It's not, oh, let's keep people from drilling. Like I understand like for me, okay, forget the climate change thing. We can talk about that on another episode, but the marine and the biodiversity and all that, like, okay, there are ecological systems in place that if you mess with one thing, it messes other things up. And like that can have a real effect on something. Like forget the climate change, but like that's a real concern. But I also don't think that is the real issue here and why they want this. There's some other, and I haven't dug into this actual treaty to see what's there. But for me, that's what it comes down to is sovereignty. And I know, I think the Senate actually passed something that said they need 2/3 votes for these kinds of things for the U.S. to even be engaged with these sorts of things. At least that's what happened with the WHO treaty that we were talking about. So for me, that's what really this is about, is this sovereignty and like what else is going to be packed in and what else is coming in there. And the fact that this was pushed so hard under the Biden administration, and it's just in the same vein as this WHO thing that was wacky and we should have never been involved with. And then again, China has way too much sway over the WHO. So that's my initial take on this. I think we're good to tread cautiously and stay out of this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
For sure. Yeah, I would just throw in there, just adding that, I think it's pretty common for people, unfortunately, because the global kind of order has baked into their ideology so strongly, the idea of climate change and the things that go along with that it's like that always ends up going back to, that's like the nucleus cause for why there needs to be more control and power and more sovereignty taken away from different nations. It's like, well, we can't allow the nations to do whatever it is they want to do or whatever is best for the individuals. We can't allow them to be able to have, like they tell their elected officials what it is that they want to do, and then their nation goes that way. It's like, we need to bring more like law and order and regulation and more like conformity to the world stage. And it's like, well, why does that need to be the case? It's like, well, because of global warming. They always point back. That's their ticket. That's their free entry ticket every time. It's just like, well, it's because we have to do this because we need to regulate mining on the open seas because we feel like mining for fossil fuels on the open seas is gonna, somehow. But it's such a jump in logic to where you're just like, you're no longer saying there's any safe or like valid way to mine or to do energy production, unless it's something that you need, like, whether it's Brussels or China or whatever, whoever's pulling the strings, unless it's energy that you need. China is allowed to have, coal plants out the wazoo, it's like, unless it's something that's helpful for you. But if it's helpful for pushing your agenda of how you want to have more international control, then it's like, well, it's because of climate change, so therefore we have to cut down on your ability to do mining in the international oceans. And it's because it's always thrown in like that, it always makes me very, very cautious and very skeptical to be like, I don't really think it's the environment that you're fundamentally concerned about. And of course, we've talked about this on other episodes, so I won't rehash. Go back and look at our other episodes that kind of do a debunking of some of that kind of climate change narrative. But it really is. It's like, that's not really what you're after. It has to be you're looking for the conformity you're looking for, and you're just using this as the leverage point, the fear tactic that gets people to be like, okay, whatever you say, international body, like, you're right. We have to allow this kind of regulation to come in.
Yeah. Climate change seems to be the cover story for just about any sort of operation that they want to implement. And it gets old at some point because I personally think that they know absolutely for certain that the whole rhetoric behind climate change is not accurate, and they are intentionally using it as leverage to pull whatever they want to do with wherever they want to do it. And it's definitely applying here too.
There's only so many 10-year timelines that you can set before you're like, the world's going to burn in the next 10 years. It's like, trust me this time, guys. Come on, we really have to do something. You got to sign this treaty or the world's going to burn. It's like, there's only so many times you can hear it before you're like, come on, guys. Come on.
Yeah, people have short memories. I think people have short memories, and they just change a little piece of it. They change a little piece of it and come back out, and it's just emotional manipulation. Like, that's all it is. And it's public shaming of anybody who doesn't get in line with this, and so I don't know. It's just fascinating to me. Like, there's this whole carbon market out there, where you can buy and sell carbon credits and this kind of thing. And then now there's a liquefied CO2 market, which is that happens in the Midwest. We've talked about this pipeline where this is a real thing. They actually capture CO2, they liquefy it and put it in a pipeline in the ground, and they want to move it, and they're using eminent domain to steal land from farmers in the Midwest. And Steve King has talked a lot about this, and to make this like a government project when it's really just for private gain. Like that's all it is. It's insanity. And it's all under climate change. Like we're going to put this in the ground until we figure out what to do with it to save humanity. But turns out they're not actually waiting to figure out what to do with it. They're using it in another state to benefit and profit for private companies. Like insanity. So anyway, this is all
I think that's
special interest at a high level.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. It's public shaming. Sorry, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to ask you, Troy, did you follow the money on this one? Like, did you find out where some sources are coming from and all that? Because typically things like this, it's like there's some money behind it and there's some money to be had. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that was my next point. I didn't follow it too far, but I mean, y'all are making a good point because this is where we've come to when it comes to climate change and protecting the world. Is we've come to this place where I don't actually have to do the thing. I just have to foot the bill. And then
talk about it.
But we're going to force the other nations to do the thing. So that's where I'm like, well, why would China want to be involved? There's a good reason why. Hey, we're going to be one of your biggest funders. We're not going to pay our dues. We're going to pay double or whatever, whatever it is. But just don't look at what we're doing, right? Like, just don't look over here. But we're paying so all these other nations will do the thing, right? And then now through that, we are, we're whatever, vicariously saving the planet,
Right.
And it's like, and that's what's happened nowadays. It's like we are vicariously saving the planet instead of saving the planet. Like that's the problem.
Yeah.
And it's like as long as you pay for something or as long as you support something, and it goes deeper than public shaming. So I think y'all have all made some really good points. I want to bring up the threat here. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the threat. Undecided nations face a deadline. So if you have not ratified this treaty, countries must ratify before the first Ocean Treaty COP, which is a conference of parties. This is the first time where all the ratified nations get together and have a conference. They love to come up with names of things. Like it's just so I'm like, what on earth is the alliances and the parties and the conferences and all that? Terrible. It's set for 2026. So if all the nations, if 60 countries ratify it, that'll be in 2026. But if you haven't ratified it before that, guess what? You lost your voting rights. You lose your voting rights.
Voting rights in what?
Get in early. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, okay. You're saying for future in this thing.
Yeah, either you get in early and you ratify, or you get in late and you're forced to comply with no representation, essentially. So now I will say they do say it's voting rights in the consensus-based process to decide how the treaty operates. So maybe you would get those back at some point. I don't know. But as far as I know at this moment, if you don't get in soon enough and you're not on board, there's a lot of pressure and you're going to essentially have to just go along with. So then at that point, it's like, do you go in? Do you not? I don't know. There's the threat. And I think it's I think they're doing it because of what the United States is doing right now. We're one of the only nations that's like not playing ball. Here's a couple of the problems that I see. Okay. And y'all have mentioned one of these. The first problem, I'm just going to say this because I love it. The High Seas Treaty is actually formally, I haven't said the name yet. It's formally known as the Agreement on the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Marine Biological Diversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction.
Do you have the acronym for that?
That's a mouthful.
BBNJ agreement is for short. BBNJ is a lot better than whatever the heck I just said. Oh, there's the first problem is they don't know how to name things. The second problem, the real problem is financial challenges facing the High Sea Treaties are daunting even for the UN environmental standards. So the UN estimates marine protection requires at least 175 billion annually. We all know, like Reese mentioned this, we all know, and Ryan, I think we all know what happens when that amount of money gets funneled through corrupt individuals, right?
Yeah.
I mean, who's at the forefront of this? Macron and people like him, right? It makes sense why it was set up through the Biden administration.
Is it
where did the money go, during the pandemic? It's like we've seen it's like it was going weird random places, it's just like it really doesn't make sense. So I think that's one of the big problems is the money issue, right? What's your question, Doug?
It was irrelevant. It was a different thought.
Can you say that amount again, Troy? That the money you're talking about is how much the treaty is putting forth is like we need all the governments to chip in this amount of money because this is how much money we think we need in order to conserve marine biology life. Is that what you're saying? Is that what that figure was?
I think the figure is the full figure. So they need, I think they're looking for a $4 trillion budget over a certain number of years. And that would be 175 billion annually.
Okay.
So I think it's
so
like 8 years or something like that. Or
so that's the
years.
full budget to be able to go, like, do the high seas governing that they need to do to be able to implement the rules and stuff.
Yeah, as far as I know, yes.
Okay. But that hasn't happened yet, or that's currently like happening. Like we're giving every country is giving money to this endeavor.
If you want to ratify it, you want to be a part of the club, you got to pay your dues. Like you got to, and a lot of that money would probably, it's not just like it's all would go into an account. A lot of it would probably be filtered through the countries themselves. They're like, hey, we can prove that we spent this amount of money here. And some of it would go to the alliance or whatever, but a lot of it would be, we can prove we spent this here doing this and all that.
And then is that parsed out through then, because, it's never just as simple as like, oh, here's the one project with the one fund. It's like this massive fund from all kinds of sources goes toward this
100%
overarching head. And then that's
going to go in all these different directions. Yeah, 100%. Like,
and those are going to be nonprofits. Is that the idea? Like a lot of nonprofit ocean organizations?
So it's going to be nonprofits. This is the pattern. You guys, I'm sure, are very familiar with this, but the pattern, anytime you have these international global bodies, and then and the countries have to get on board, and they're like, okay, all right, we're on board. They're like, all right, we need to put the money somewhere, and we have to meet these metrics of showing that we really care and we're really doing something about, the climate or about the water situation. What do we do? Every time NGOs start stepping in and they're like, oh, hey, let us take care of it. Give us the money. And we have these, what are they called? We have these smart people, these advisors that will be able to tell you exactly what to do. And then, we'll get them to kind of make this circle and we'll figure it all out for you. But if you watch the money, it always goes back to the people that are on the board of the international treaty that you're looking at to start with. So like they have friends, they have connections, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, my friend so-and-so, he runs an NGO that can help you to be able to get in line with this treaty country. So just connect with him. And then, I also happen to be a board member on his NGO, and he's a board member on my, and so it's a circle, and the money just goes back around and around and around, and it stays within this constant circulating body of NGOs and advisors and people that are sitting on people's boards. And it's a really tight knit circle. If you could dig into it, it's absolutely incredible. It's a racket of incredible proportions. And it's like countries just go along with it because once they start to agreeing to these things, they have to meet standards. They don't know how to meet it, and they're busy and they have other things they have to deal with. So they're like, okay, we'll just throw the money at them and they'll figure it out. And it's like you create the problem and then you create the solution for it, and all your friends are on each other's boards. It's a great way to rake in tons of money.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's the main problem is when you have a certain amount of money you have to spend to do something. It's like, well, we have to put this money somewhere. And so people aren't going to look into where the money's going, right? Like, it's just like, well, we had to put it somewhere. It's like, well, we've got this great organization.
Professional spenders. I'm going to coin the term. They're professional spenders is what they should be, their term should be coined as.
So there's another industry that we haven't mentioned yet that I think might be interested in having this treaty, and I'm going to reveal that in just a second. But first, this is pitched as like a historic conservation win, like economic, like let's preserve all these things and let's do all this. But it's giving up sovereignty. It's making global governance over 2/3 of the world's oceans. 2/3 of the world's oceans. That's a massive amount of area. So right now it's just you can't drill, but maybe tomorrow it's you can't drive your submarine through this now. Or you can't do whatever else. You got to go around. You got to go like it's crazy. But here's another thing: there's a treaty provision that's called equitable benefit sharing for marine genetic resources. So what does that mean? Equitable benefit sharing. Well, companies can profit from ocean-derived innovations like drugs and chemicals and minerals, and they pay royalties and these sorts of things. So maybe Big Pharma is behind this. Who knows?
Wow.
I don't know, man. Think about this. There are examples of Big Pharma going down, pharmaceutical companies going down to like the Amazon and these different places, and they find these tribes. They use these certain, it's like a certain plant that cures something that they just have no understanding of why, but they find out someone eats this plant. So what they do is they take that plant back, they isolate everything in the plant, all the different chemicals and all the different, the phosphorus, whatever in the plant, and they find out what actually does the thing. And what they did was they went and they found out the exact thing. And so they went and lobbied Congress to make it illegal to put that in food, and they made a synthetic version of it. And that's what you get in a drug today.
Oh,
and so that is called disgusting corruption. So maybe they're also involved in this. That could be a part of this. I don't know that they're necessarily
surprised. Hey, I think it's important to point out, though, real quick, that talking about all the money going to all the different organizations and such, there are going to be good organizations that do good things, like remove the garbage from the ocean and all that. Like, we're not saying that that doesn't exist. We're just saying that the bigger problem is these kinds of things that are happening. So those do exist, but unfortunately,
and I'm all for that. Like, I'm all for protecting the environment, protecting the oceans, you know, being good stewards of the world that we live in. You know, it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, and we should be doing that. But there's a good way and there's a bad way to do it. So I want to show y'all this. Let me see if I can find it here. Can y'all figure out what's going on here? We're going to segue into the U.S.'s involvement. Nonprofit uncovers web of illegal activity lurking in international waters. The sea is like a minefield. What do y'all think that has to do with?
Well, pirates comes to mind, but I feel like it's probably not actually talking about pirates. But I would like, you know,
legit, dude.
Can I just say real quick, when people hear pirates, they think of the like, I don't know if people know that pirating is a real thing today. Like, there are people who drive up with guns, like these vessels that go across and bring all your stuff from China, your TVs from Japan or whatever, and bring them over here. They get hijacked. Like, these big cargo carriers get hijacked, and they literally hire security firms to be on those ships so that they can fend off these people that literally come up with a little like rowboat and you know, try and take over a ship. And so that it's a real thing today.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is the real thing. And
they got cannons and eye patches and parrots and, you know,
Of
swords.
course.
The whole
that's
they have to. You
requirement
can't be a
to
pirate
become part
unless
of the
you have an
club.
eye patch. It's
Well,
that should be going
Peg
to
legs and
international treaty.
hooks and stuff. Yeah, got to have it.
Yeah, and that's the threat against Trump right now, because when you read this web of illegal activity lurking in international waters, you assume pirate, you know, like you assume like this is the pirate gang that is like attacking vessels or whatever. It's not. They're actually talking about fishermen off the coast of Italy who are using inappropriate fishing devices. And so here's the thing:
inappropriate fishing device.
Literally minefield. It's literally explosive things.
No. Just
killing
fish aggregating devices. They're just like, they're fishing devices that have not, they're homemade fishing devices. They've not been approved by whatever authority decides what's approved.
Oh, right. Somebody's not making money off of them. That's why.
Right. And so here's the thing. So we've got that. So this is the setup for what happens when you push back against this treaty, right? Chile is paving the way to high seas protection. Others must follow, right? Others must follow. First ever UN, I would say the governments are doubling down on their commitments. Anyways, I don't even know why I pulled this up, but here's the problem. If enough countries ratify this, it becomes binding law for them, right? And if there's enough of them, it would probably justify those countries turning on a country outside of the club to enforce their will upon that nation as well. We've already talked about how it sounds like the WHO, sounds a lot like the World Economic Forum, things like that. We need a tragedy that justifies giving us the power to dictate and enforce law upon all nations, regardless of their cooperation. So in this article here, Chile is paving the way. It says all governments must also allocate the necessary resources to implement and effectively manage MPAs. So the language is starting to turn sour. It's getting worse and worse, right? How is Trump involved? And I say Trump is becoming a pirate right now. So I looked up, how do you become a pirate? Are you ready to become a pirate? Well, it's easy. All you have to do, the first step in becoming a pirate, is filling out and submitting an application to Orange Coast College. Oh wait, never mind. This is just a college recruitment site. Okay, so Trump's deep sea mining executive order sparks condemnation by scientists and conservationists. All right, why are people so mad at Trump right now? Why is the UN so mad? Well, it's because they're setting up the Kraken. So what is the Kraken? It's probably, in this case, the Kraken is probably the environment. The Kraken is the Kraken. It's the ocean animals, right? It's the giant squids. You know, it's the things that they're trying to protect, which again, I would say I would love to protect. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the way they're trying to do it, maybe not, because we've seen this pattern happen before, maybe not the best. So this U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order April 24th of this year to open both U.S. and international waters to deep sea mining, ignoring this global treaty that controls the high seas.
Has that been enacted yet? He signed it and it's going through, but it hasn't been like finalized, right? Is that the?
It hasn't been finalized, and in fact, all that it really does is it says over the next 60 days from April, so that would be April, May, June, so that we've passed the 60-day mark. But over the next 60 days, they're going to look at how can we start mining. That's essentially what it says. We're going to look into. Here's the executive order right here. They're talking about the executive order. They're essentially looking into how we're going to start mining, how we're going to start collecting these minerals. One of the things is a Canadian mining group called the Metals Company has sought a permit from the Trump administration to begin commercial deep sea mining. So essentially, interestingly enough, it's a Canadian company that said, "Hey, Trump just signed this executive order. We're going to jump on. We're going to make some money off of this." And they said, "Hey, let us be your contractor. Essentially, we're gonna be the middleman. We're gonna go do the mining for you underneath this executive order that you've signed." So they're trying to begin commercial deep sea mining. And while at the same time in July, middle of July, nations are gathering in Jamaica, all the UN nations, to resume their International Seabed Authority meetings. We'll see if the U.S. shows up or not. We're almost at the middle of July right now. I'm not sure exactly what day they're but I'm guessing we're not going to be there, or at least no high-level delegates again. But let's look at what Trump is trying to do. So can Trump really approve mining in international waters? Where is my... I'm missing.
Lose a link.
Here we go. There we go. This is it. So what is he looking for? Buried treasure. In the ocean between North America and Hawaii lies a large area known as the Clarion Clipperton Zone, a particularly abundant area filled with copper, cobalt, and nickel.
Exactly.
These minerals are 200 meters below the surface. And a lot of these are minerals that are used in technology. Same thing with the U.S. involvement in some of the African countries that have a huge deposit of these minerals right now, like cobalt, like copper and nickel. And this is the Clarion Clipperton Zone. So there is, I'm going to scroll down here. There's actually a zoomed in version of it. So you've got Hawaii right here. And this is Mexico over here. There's the United States and then Mexico down here. So you've got all of these different zones that they've put little labels on. So there's things that there's protected areas. There's places you can explore, reserved areas for future exploration. You're not allowed to explore right now, but in the future we will. That's interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. But this zone that apparently has this insane amount of deposits that Trump is wanting to mine. And it makes sense that the U.S. would be involved here because you've got Hawaii right here, and then Mexico right there, and then you have the U.S. up here. So technically, Hawaii and Mexico are the closest, but this is
like a little precious minerals sandwich. We got we got the U.S. on one side, we got the U.S. Hawaii on the other side, and we got precious minerals in the middle. Just bookmarking it.
Right. So what do y'all think about this? Because this is like, this is huge opportunity. But at the same time, this is exactly what the UN is trying to keep nations from being able to do until they have control over our ability and all the nations' ability to do it. Like that's what they're wanting before. And one of the things they keep pushing back and saying is they said rules and regulations for commercial mining created by the ISA will not be ready for several more years. And essentially they keep saying, hey, we don't know enough about the marine life. We haven't studied this much yet. And I'm like, come on, y'all. Like I was watching marine life exploration documentaries when I was like 6 years old. Like we've been studying this for like 50 plus years. It's like, what do you mean you haven't studied it enough? I'm like, anyways, that's one side of it. But yeah, that's their pushback is like, we're going to greatly affect this area of the ocean. It may never be the same. Right. And my first thought was, as soon as I heard that, I read that, I was like, man, when you pave a parking lot, that piece of land is never the same. And yet we're paving parking lots all day long, so it's like, like the world, it's like, yes, when human beings show up into a certain area, it's like, it's technically never the same, unless you undo everything you did and replant the trees and all that kind of stuff, so it's like, that is part of what happens, when human beings live in the world. But what do y'all think about this?
Two quick thoughts. Thought number one about what you just said. The international community is trying to keep people from doing this kind of mining until they get the treaty in place. so that they can then regulate it. And like you just said, well, we can't let people do this yet because we don't have enough studies in place. What makes me think of is every time anyone tries to build in the state of California, if you try to build anything in the state of California, you have to pay the government to run environmental studies. And they run these environmental studies all the time to be like, what is going to be the environmental impact of the parking lot I want to build or the apartment building that I want to build, right? So you have to pay the government lots of money and you have to wait, and your permit is put on hold for years and years, only for them to come back to you and say, no, sorry, you can't build this new apartment complex, even though we desperately need more housing here in California because housing is expensive. You can't build it because it's going to affect the environment. So that's my point number one. Point number two, that's directly connected to this. It makes sense that China is gung-ho about this and says, yeah, United States, you better not do any mining. You're going to hurt the environment if you mine offshore because we get lots of our minerals from China. China's already doing the mining. That's the point, as you just brought up. Eric, as pointed out, China already does the mining. China don't care. China's mines all day long. China is mining all over their land, and they might be mining out in the international waters. They don't play by the rules, and they're able to get away with it. And so it's actually helpful for them to have more rules on everyone else and to have these large bureaucratic bodies slow down the permit process and slow down the United States' ability to have cobalt and be able to create itself. Because if the U.S. can't make it itself or can't mine off of their own shores to get this stuff themselves, then they end up having to always be dependent and buy it from China, because China is never going to fall in line with actually meeting these same kind of rules. So that's my 2 points.
Yeah, one of the things I read, the UN has accused Donald Trump of violating international law. Guess who else? China has, since April, accused Donald Trump of violating international law.
This is so crazy. Like China, that's like, let's talk about the South China Sea. Like, what's going on down there? You got Vietnam, you got the Philippines, and you got Indonesia, all these other countries. And China perpetually violates those. They even said it says it's their waters. They're building artificial islands out there. So where are they talking? Who are they to talk about any of this stuff? The problem though is that this environmental thing, like environmental study, like the problem is that there's a legitimate need for that. Like if you're gonna in Florida, if you're gonna build something, you're gonna have rainwater and stormwater. That's gonna be a big deal. You're gonna know where's that water gonna go. Like they build little blank little things for ponds, like dry ponds for water to come up in and go out, and it needs to flow through the city. Like you really need that stuff. But what you don't need is to redirect a bunch of water out to the ocean instead of to the farmers so you can save a little fish. That's what they do in California. And so like there's an actual example about it. Like Trump talked about it. They don't have drought. They should not have those issues. It's because they manage the rainwater that they do have terribly. And so that's one thing I want to say is that there are legitimate environmental concerns that we should take into consideration. But the problem is they want to magnify those ones and make it like that's the main issue, when that's really just the magic trick. Look over here while we're really doing this. And that's the problem, is where we can't fall for it. Yeah. And we can't keep talking about this like environmental concerns don't matter. They do matter, but that's not what we're talking about here. That's not the real issue here. And like you said, this is China already doing these exact same things, and they're coming in and speaking out against it. It's like China talking about human rights abuses and how they and how the US and this and that and freedom of speech and religion and all this. And it's like, you got to be kidding me. Look at what they're doing, and they have not been held to account ever since the U.S. helped them get into the international trade and favored trade status and all kinds of stuff decades ago. So yeah, it's just more of the same tune.
So I'm going to turn this over to Doug in a second. We're going to talk about Epstein, how all that plays into this very interesting connection.
I'm super curious because I have no idea how this gets to Epstein. So I'm just, I don't know how this gets to Epstein, but we're going to roll on for the ride. So
before we jump into that, I want to bring up one final point, and it is essentially what they're going to try to do to the U.S. if we don't comply, right? So this Q&A, can Trump really approve mining in international waters? This is an environmental lawyer, Duncan Cury, and he's discussing fears that deep sea miners could bypass a UN agreement and apply to mine under U.S. law. So he's saying he's afraid that these companies like the one in Canada are going to essentially mine underneath this U.S. law that Trump is trying to create instead of the UN law, right? So one of the things that he says is he said that even though the U.S. hasn't ratified the ISA, it signed a more recent 1994 agreement. So he's talking about, remember, 1982 is when it started, and then 1994 was when they first started developing some of the law language or whatever, and then 2023 is when they finally came out with this treaty. But he said it signed this thing in 1994. And he says, meaning the U.S. is bound by the law of the Sea of Conventions. So he would say, and he would argue that the UN can hold the United States to the fire because of what we signed in 1994. Also, another argument that he makes is that he says some in the U.S. government would say they did in 1982 that they did agree to Part 11, which includes the mining. That's where the mining is found in this deep sea, whatever the document was or whatever. And he says, if we actually agreed to that in 1982, that they would be able to hold us to that for that reason as well. I'm like, I don't know anything about international law, so I have no idea if he's right or not. But here's another thing he says. Under international law, the metals that we mined could not be sold. So the same way that, going back to the fishing, the illegal fishing, what they do to stop that is if they figure out, hey, you've been fishing illegally or using illegal devices or whatever, traps or nets, guess what? You're not legally, nobody else is legally allowed to buy that fish from you. Underneath whatever they govern, the places
now
that
official black market.
Yes. And so if the U.S.
official black market,
yeah, if the U.S. mined for this stuff outside of the UN treaty, guess what? None of those nations would be able to buy that from us because it would technically be illegal, pirated minerals.
So you can't sell it, but you can use it.
Run though, because if we mine these minerals and then the international community says no one's allowed to buy these minerals from the United States, that means that we have to make our own refineries finally.
Well, then
we're no longer dependent on other people and we can just make our own stuff again.
Yeah, that should be happening anyway. Like that should be happening anyway. It's a national security issue. Like, who cares if we can't sell them to another country? Like we need it so we don't have to buy them from other countries and be reliant on that. Like that's why China is interested in Africa and why they help North Korea. It's the minerals.
Yeah, and that I think that's a good point. That's a pro. I think that's a pro. One of the cons potentially is then the UN says, okay, or the whatever, the governing body over this treaty, they would say, okay, nobody's allowed to buy any of these minerals from the United States because we can't tell where they came from, whether they were mined illegally or not. So there's another problem, is that like now suddenly they start putting trade restrictions completely over all these nations and the U.S. and
sanctioned by the international community, essentially.
Yes, and that's one of the potential negatives.
Yeah, and that's where it behooves the U.S. to have strong agreements now, where we're using the leverage that the U.S. has instead of being kind of thrown to the side and being taken advantage of. And so that's where it's a three-legged stool. You can't take away one of them and not fall over. And so we need to have those to where, like we've talked about before, where the U.S. has to have agreements and economic ties and those sorts of things, so that if other countries want to act against our interests, they're simultaneously acting against their own interest. And so that's where we need to have that kind of tie together. So that it can't happen, so that they can't have this UN-led revolt against the U.S.
Absolutely. This whole story, although is very serious, is kind of like making me crack up a little bit over here, because it's making me think about have y'all heard the phrase, they've made their decision, let them enforce it? Y'all have heard that phrase before? It was originally attributed to Andrew Jackson, I think, but people debate on whether or not he said that or not. But it essentially was like a court made a decision that he didn't like, and he might not have said this. It's not proven, but that was like, hey, the court said they made their decision. Great, let them enforce it. And essentially it goes back to like, which I don't completely agree with the philosophy behind this, but in the real world, oftentimes it's like might makes right.
Yeah, put your money where your mouth is.
The United States, right? Who think about, the NATO. Think about NATO, right? Like, who enforces NATO? Who's the biggest player in NATO? The United States, right? So who enforces the UN's directive? So it's like, well, you have a lot of other countries, but the US is really powerful. And so who's going to come knocking on the US's door saying, hey, US, you better stop doing this mining. You better get in line. Like, it's like Trump could literally say, oh, the UN has made their decision. Let them enforce it. Like, what are they going, literally, what are they going to do? If a Canadian company says,
come at
hey,
me, bro.
US, I'll mine under you, I'll mine under your executive order, and opposed to the UN, like there's nothing that the international community can really do unless they want to just go ahead and declare war on the United States. Like, you know, we have a lot of leverage. I will put it that way. And I don't think we should always use it in that kind of sort of arrogant, blustering sort of way. But the U.S. does have a lot of leverage. So if the international community wants to do something, how about they try enforcing stuff against China before they start trying to enforce stuff against the United States?
That's case in point to me. Like, this is not like, hey, we're mighty and powerful, so we can do whatever we want and not have any ethics or any morals and not do anything with integrity. Like, no, we should be doing things with integrity. We should be doing things holding others to account. And exactly like you said, they're going to lopsided apply this stuff. So we can just say, fine, let's see what you got. Like bring it. We're going to go ahead and do what we're going to do with integrity, with doing the right thing and the right considerations and all this stuff. But the thing is, even if it like, there could be this big plan to have the U.S. have no minerals at all and be completely excluded. And so in that case, should we let that happen? Or should we say, well, forget you, we're going to go mine this and get our own minerals? Like, just as an example, like, forget you. It's like, if that's going to happen, then that's what's going to happen. So, okay, if the marine life suffers, well, we need to survive as a nation and not be destroyed. So, you know, that's another track of, I'm not necessarily saying we should go down that path, but I'm saying if that was the case, what would we choose? What would be the right thing for the government to do in that case? It's not, you know, I had a class during my MBA that was called Right versus Right. And you get all of these. It's not right versus wrong. It's a lot of times a decision that's difficult because you can justify this or you can justify that. But how do you think through these things? You know, like if you find out your company's going to lay off a bunch of people, but you are told you can't tell your employees about it, but you know that this guy's going to make a decision and a big purchase that's going to destroy his family if he gets laid off. What do? Do you tell him about it or do you not tell him about it? Like, you gotta, what's the right thing to do? So anyway, it gets a little more complicated, but.
And I think it comes back to the analogy from the beginning in the Pirates film. You know, it's like, if anybody's ever seen those pirate movies, it's just a bunch of main characters switching sides over and over again. It's like, now I'm a pirate. But now I've got some leverage over here. So now I'm working for the East India Trading Company, but only to get what I want. But now I'm a pirate again. But now I'm good again. You know, it's like, it's literally like just people blackmailing each other and switching back and forth, you know, and it's like, it gets so confusing by the end that it makes no sense at all. But I mean, that's where we are as in the real world as well. You know, like, to sum this up, that's where we're at, is like, okay, everybody's making different decisions and everybody's trying to pressure each other and everybody's got their own leverage that they're coming to the table with, you know, and there's a pirate order, there's an East India Trading Company or whatever, you know, there's all these different orders or alliances that are trying to put the pressure on. And it's like, I think it comes down to people in authority have got to decide to do the right thing in the moment. And that's going to look different depending on where we are in the timeline. So Doug, can you take it over and let us know? Because man, I'm just I'm a little bit shocked that this has anything to do with Epstein at all. We'll see if the viewers think that this connection is justified or not. But we'll see.
Okay, so I'm calling this theory side quest. Ready? So there's obviously, with all the drilling and the mining stuff, like everything we just talked about, that's probably the most relevant part about this. But when we first started talking about protected waters, my brain immediately went to the past few presidential administrations and how they were protecting the waters and their connections to less than good things. And once again, I'm going to be avoiding particular words, so fill in the blanks wherever you feel appropriate. But there, I believe, may be a side quest to this whole repealing of this UNCLOS, or not. It's not a repealing of UNCLOS, but it's like a Trump backing out. I don't know what we would call it, like the one big overarching term for this concept is, but I can't help but think that there's another part of this story. It's almost kind of like we've got the A story and then the B story is another thing happening in the background. Okay. So, there is Obama and Biden had water protection throughout their terms, and they had the drilling bans and all that stuff, right? They they limited exploration near many different sites, and I can't help but notice some of these sites. We're going to get into that. I have maps pulled up and all kinds of weird stuff, so I'm going to get my my thing pulled up here. Let's see if this works. I don't know if we need to adjust that somehow a little bit better.
Yeah, I'll switch it for you.
So in case you guys didn't know, Justlain Maxwell, she is obviously the, or for those who don't know, she is the woman who's very closely tied to Epstein. And she actually is in prison right now because she did get charged for crimes against children. And she was basically Epstein's like right-hand person, right? They were very well connected. She has a very interesting history with protected waters. It goes deeper than you might think. So I just want to show this one, like Socialite's Mysterious Ocean Charity. She has a charity. Let's go to this next tab. Okay. Justlain Maxwell has a long history with the open waters. Her father was also involved in the open waters, and he died mysteriously being thrown off of a yacht in like 1991.
Yeah, she later said that she thought he got murdered. Originally, it was supposed to look like suicide, but later she came out and said, no, she thought it was a murder.
Yeah, and it was over some sort of financial debacle thing where he was like laundering money or stealing money from people and in the millions of dollars, right? So she opened up the Terramar project, and from everything that we know, this project is one of those nonprofit things, and there's really not a lot of money that went through it to do anything. This was basically a shell company, and she used it.
I like the tagline there on the title, reputation cleanser. The Marine Conservation Charity was a reputation cleanser. I was like, wow, that's a really good title for that's a good description of the use of a charity in this regard. So interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I think I still have my stuff highlighted. So I'm going to connect some dots here. This is what I'm good at. I apologize for anybody who's irritated at the way that I pull up information, but it's always dots. Like I don't have this one big smoking gun thing. It's always like, here's a dot here and a dot here and a dot here. And when you connect them all, it paints this picture. So we're just going to talk
That's
about
why
all
I pay the big bucks, Doug.
Yeah, I know, right? So this is a quote from Maxwell. She says, "My love of the sea and adventure took me on an odyssey that eventually led me to flying deep worker submersibles, remotely operated underwater vehicles, and helicopters, as well as becoming a certified emergency medical technician." That's from Maxwell, who has been confirmed to be a human trafficker. That's not a conspiracy theory.
She's serving 20 years. She's serving 20 years right now for that. Yeah.
Yes. That's a general statement. There's a lot more to it, but pretty much she did it, and that's not a question.
Yeah.
Terramar,
and Epstein said that she was his best friend.
Yeah.
She was his quote unquote personal assistant for a long time, ran all of this stuff.
They were romantically involved, all of that. Yeah.
Right.
She would procure underage victims for him and their clients. She was very well involved. She tried to say during the trial, she tried to say that she was just being used by Epstein, but they kind of proved that basically she was involved well enough that
Central Park.
Yeah, she wasn't going to get away with it. Okay, so she opened up the Terramar project. The Terramar project utilized protected waters laws. And here's a quote from here. "These high-profile events dovetailed with Maxwell's and the project's high-profile partnerships. The project's effort to hold the United Nations to sustainable promises made regarding the ocean were praised and backed by the Clinton Global Initiative." I just thought that was an interesting point. Another little dot. So elites were involved in the Terramar project, and they some of them contributed money, but ultimately a lot of this money kind of just disappeared. Up here says funding. The Terramar project was funded substantially by loans from Justlain Maxwell. The organization gave $874 in grants during its existence. For over all the years that it existed, it only gave $874 in grants. So shell company.
$874?
$874 in grants. Did I say grants? I think I forgot the word.
No, you said it perfect. I'm just saying there's not some zeros missing there.
Yeah,
right.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, the project's revenues were as low as $582 in 2017 to as high as $132,000 and change in 2014. So yeah, this just screams shell company, right? But it gets a little bit deeper than this. The Terramar project mission was to create a global ocean community based around the idea of shared ownership of the global commons, also known as the high seas or international waters. So the point behind the Terramar project, supposedly, was to protect the waters. And my big question is, what are they protecting the waters from? I believe they're protecting the waters from scrutiny. They didn't want people to know what they were doing with these waters.
I thought. No, go ahead.
No, you
I was just saying, I thought you were going to say that's the Nephilim headquarters in the deep sea. That's what I thought you were going to say. Is that's where they're all. That's where the portal is, man. That's the portal under the sea. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Keep that thought in mind. They're
not concealing done. Atlantis.
I'm planting a seed for future episodes. Everybody stay tuned. Oh.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
So here's a little note I have on the side here. Maxwell's Terramar project focused on high seas under UNCLOS, raised $200,000 and owed her $560,000. Its closure post Epstein's arrest and symbolic citizenship scheme fuel theories at masked trafficking, leveraging international waters, weak enforcement, because that's really what this comes down to. It is a very, very weak enforcement of like policing in these areas that are supposedly protected from big bad people coming to drill oil. So you'll never guess what area, what island lies within these protected waters. Anybody have any guesses?
I mean, I think it's probably pretty obvious.
Epstein Island. Is it for sale right now? I think is it one of those that's for sale right now?
This is for sale.
I forgot the name of it. Little St. James. Yeah.
Little St. James Island does lie, and I actually looked up a whole different map. I'm going to show you guys that in a minute too, because it gets really interesting. So Little St. James Island lies in some of this protected area because it's in the Virgin Islands, which is protected. And when I was looking at this on the map, I don't know if you guys can see this or not. Like, oh yeah, you can see it because I can see it up there on screen. I can't figure out for the life of me what this block is. So maybe Ryan, this is your portal right here. They somehow, because obviously this is not a natural occurrence with this nice little square block here, but there's something going on right there. I'm not sure what it was. I tried to figure out.
It's a Google Maps. It's a Google Maps. Like it's a shot from a different time. Like it's two different.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay.
This is
Very
Google Earth.
Conveniently located just off the south of the island there. I see.
Awfully convenient. Yeah. Anyway, so that I just thought that was a fun thing to.
So wait, you're saying Epstein Island is not the official name of that island? I thought that was the official.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Was that a joke? I wasn't sure.
That was a joke.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's now turned into basically Epstein's Island, but yeah. So
Jacob, our producer, said it's the secret kaiju portal that they're hiding.
I don't know what kaiju.
If that's the right name, I don't even know. It's like a Godzilla monster, you know, that kind of thing.
So maybe that's where there's a new term that you might not have heard, a USO. It's an unidentified submerged object. So maybe maybe we're talking about some of the occult Nephilim stuff now. So we'll go ahead and that's the last seed I'll plant for this episode.
Look at the article he just pulled up. Hiding a submarine right now.
Oh, look at here. Look at there. USO.
So this didn't prove to be true, but I thought it was interesting. So at the time when Epstein was arrested, Maxwell disappeared. And so everybody's like, where did Maxwell go? And she shut down the Terramar project. So like all of this just points to like guilty. You know, like why would you do all of this stuff if you weren't guilty? You know, it turns out she was just in like one of her estates. I don't remember, like in New Jersey or something random like that. But theories went crazy online.
James Bond.
Like she legitimately, yeah, basically she legitimately has a license for a submarine, like, or a submersible, not a submarine. Sorry. Yeah. Two different things. And so people were like, is she hiding under there? And then this is getting a little bit into some speculation and nothing that's really provable,
Mm.
but there is speculation that there are tunnels underneath Little St. James Island, and that there was a little bit more of a covert operation than what might be initially thought. And that's one where Maxwell comes in with her submersible. She was able to traffic, which, by the way, just another little connection. This just popped up in my mind. I think if I'm right on this, I'm going to zoom out. Let's just take a little trip real quick. That's the Virgin Islands. Let's see. We are Dominican. Okay, no, it's a different. My brain went somewhere completely random. The thing that I often do with my thought process is like these thoughts pop up and I connect them, and then sometimes they don't connect. And so I was like, whoa, wait about.
Isn't there another island that's close by that's connected though? Like, aren't we dealing with like?
Well, yeah, for sure. I didn't know.
So
if you
you're
wanted to get
saying
into that.
we
There's,
let's go to the
should,
other island, because there's something else connected. So the 2023 Biden administration, right? That's like we literally were like writing the treaty in 2023 and saying, hey, we need to be a part of this. We need to protect the international waters, right? And that's connected to this, like the Biden family, and that's what's so weird about it. Like, and where's that island located? Because isn't there something that they own?
It was, there is. They so Biden's brother, Joe Biden's brother, James Biden, owns about an acre on one of these islands. I unfortunately didn't have time to get too deep into that and like bring up any like legit evidence as its connection, but it is an island that is connected to
it's
this.
10 miles, isn't it? 10 nautical miles from Little St. James. That's what I read. Is the island that they own land on.
It sounds like we should stop just talking about the Epstein flight log and start talking about the Epstein underwater tunnel pass participants.
Yeah. There's Dog Island. It's got to be off of, because it was like, I can't remember. It was like water or something.
But it's 10 nautical miles from Little St. James. It's owned by the Biden family. And guess what's on the island? On their strip of land on the island?
I don't know. I didn't get that
temple.
part.
A submarine port.
What?
On their strip of the land. There's a submarine. It's closed down now.
The Obamas own an island? I didn't know
see that, Doug?
Biden's. He's saying the Biden's, not the Obamas.
Biden's.
The
own an island. That's even more surprising.
Biden's brother. I'm like pulling up the articles right now, but I guess Biden's brother owns like an acre of land or something on an island somewhere relatively close by.
Hey, don't quote me on the submarine port, but that's what I read.
Huh.
Okay, that's what I read. Yeah, I could be wrong. So
that's interesting.
If that's true, then that's a crazy connection.
We're getting off, Doug. Bring us home.
Well, I think Doug just froze, so we're gonna have to bring ourselves home. Oh. What are y'all's thoughts so far?
It's weird, the reputation. I just go back to like, people that are doing sketchy stuff. You need a reputation cleanser. You need some sort of organization that's like, well, why were you here? Why were you traveling here? Why were you traveling there? Why do you have this? Why do you have that? If anybody asks, it's like, oh, it's all for my charity work. It's all for my protecting international waters. It's all for that's what we're doing, right? And so it makes sense for somebody to have that. It is. I don't know what to think of the weird connections with the fact that like the international water, that's part of what they're protecting, that even though they're not doing anything, obviously from the amount of money they're giving with grants and stuff, that organization was not doing what it was supposed to do. It was doing nothing. If anything, it's just at least it's just a weird vanity project. At worst, it's a cover for heinous activities that we know is not a conspiracy theory. For fact, at least Maxwell was trafficking victims, at least to Epstein, if not to anybody else, at least to Epstein. That is, she's in jail for that. That's been officially confirmed. And so, it is crazy to see the weird international waters connection is bizarre. And the fact that they're maybe somehow taking advantage of international treaties saying we want to protect these certain areas of water. I don't know. It's really weird to think about. It's very weird to think about.
I'm going to throw this up. I'm going to throw this up because this is the connecting point that I was just talking about. Well, we'll bring it back over to this one here. So Water Island is a 500-acre spit of land in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The Department of Defense purchased the island from a Danish company during World War II, using it to protect a submarine base on nearby St. Thomas. Since then, it has become an under-the-radar tropical getaway dotted with several dozen homes where the largest beachfront estates can fetch north of $1 million. And this is where James Biden, 6 years, Joe's Jr., has purchased land and owns some land. So like that's the connecting point. So the submarine base is on an island close to there. It's not on that island. But hey, Doug's back. I just found the information, Doug. The submarine base is close to that, but it's not on that island. It's on a nearby island. Whoops, my bad. There we go. But yeah, the Biden's own land. The island's 10 nautical miles from Little St. James. Anyways, we're just gonna leave it there. Whatever. Yeah, I mean, y'all can think what you want to think. I'm just like, yeah.
I think you connected enough dots to say we need to look more into this, whether it's connected to this actual treaty that they're trying to do or not. There's more questions I now want to answer about some of that seafaring things out there and how they're using some of that. That was new for me.
Mm-hmm. This might be a good time to plug the fact that I don't remember. You guys had a lengthy discussion about the whole Epstein situation and the FBI memo, the FBI DOJ memo saying that there's no third-party incriminating evidence. Y'all had Troy and Doug had a lengthy discussion about that yesterday. So to go back and look at yesterday's episode if you want to, I guess, hear more takes on that whole situation, because I know that's a massive debacle and situation right now.
We had our producer say that, Doug,
thing.
You made too many connections, and so your FBI trailer pulled the plug on your internet there. So.
That's what it looks like. So I'm literally, I had to use my hotspot. My Wi-Fi
That's enough. He's out.
Do you have one more connection, Doug?
Connecting the dots.
Yeah, I got one more I'm going to try to go through this quick because apparently I don't have it. Okay, so there's what's called an OCS withdrawal, outer continental shelf. The OCS is submerged land, subsoil, and seabed extending from the outer boundary of U.S. territory waters, 12 nautical miles from the coast, to at least 200 nautical miles offshore, where the U.S. has jurisdiction over natural resources under the outer continental shelf lands. And let's, I got to put it back up. It killed my, I got to do the whole present thing real quick. This might get funky, but hold on. Because it actually took it out. Let's see. There we go. That's Troy's, right? Is that
Troy? Can you stop presenting?
Yep. There we go. Well, I don't know why it's not. There we go. No,
there we go. Okay. Perfect. So I actually put this map together this morning, last minute. I found this map and I had to put all this whole legend together to figure things out. So this red right here, you see the red grid is the OCS withdrawal area. That means that it's legal action by the president or Congress to protect these areas from leasing or development for a specified period, often to preserve environmental, cultural, or economic interests. Withdrawal can be temporary or indefinite. So you see here in the US, we have a lot of that obviously over the coastlines, right? All this red dash area, all the brownish color, that is potential offshore oil and gas planning areas, not necessarily where it is. See this block right here? Can you guys see me moving that mouse?
Yeah.
Yep. This area that's protected, that's basically what this is. You can't do anything here. Well, guess what's in that? This is the Virgin Islands, where Little St. James Island is. And I know that's because that's U.S. territory. I know you can explain that away with, well, it's just because, the U.S. owns that. But why this specifically? It just, things line up too much. This has been a very protected area. It could be that it was protected on purpose because of what they were doing, or it could be the inverse of they chose this area because it was protected. I'm not exactly sure. But either way, this area has been basically off limits to anybody scrutinizing it for any reason for decades. So that was one of the last things I
think that's what we come down to is what is the leverage, and and what are people trying to use? It's the scrutiny, it's the anti-scrutiny thing. It's you can't look into what we're doing, you can't see what we're doing, but as long as our names are on this list, we're good, right? Exactly. As long as our names are in as long as we're in the club, we're good. As long as we paid our dues, and it's I think that's the problem we're constantly seeing. It doesn't really matter what people are really doing behind the scenes as much as it matters what it looks like they're doing out front, and that's on both fronts of this story. So
it's the same thing as
connections, Doug.
So, yeah. And so people like this can use these rules and regulations to do nefarious things. That's kind of the big point of this. And so maybe this side quest is kind of exposing that a little bit. And that's my final point, is maybe there's a better or a different reason why we're going to just blow this all open and maybe not have these areas protected. Maybe we'll actually get a legitimate investigation out of this and we'll find out some things. Hopefully. I don't know. That's speculation. We'll see.
Great.
That's all.
Good episode. For all those listening, don't forget we have exclusive episodes available. One of the exclusive episodes that came out this week was we all talk about steroids, and we discuss whether we personally would take steroids or not and our feelings about them, but then a little bit of research as to some steroid options that have come out recently. So a lot of good exclusive episodes in case y'all are interested in that extra content. But that's all we got for today, and we'll see y'all next time.